What if the life you're working so hard to build isn't actually the life you want? What if the salary, the promotion, the expensive car, the bigger house, the impressive job title, and even the idea of becoming successful are all part of a game you never consciously chose to play? And what if real wealth isn't about having more things, but about having more control over your time? These are some of the questions that make Naval Ravikant's ideas so fascinating. The Almanack of Naval Ravikant, compiled by Eric Jorgensen, brings together years of Naval's thoughts on wealth, happiness, business, judgment, relationships, and freedom. But this isn't really a book about becoming rich in the traditional sense. It's about understanding how the world works, identifying your unique advantages, and building a life where money becomes a tool rather than the master of your life. Naval's philosophy begins with the distinction that most people never stop to make. Money and wealth are not the same thing. Money is a way of transferring wealth. Wealth is something that keeps producing value. Imagine two people. The first earns a very high salary but has to keep working every month to maintain that income. The second owns a business, software product, intellectual property, investments, or another productive asset that can continue creating value without requiring every minute of their personal labor. Both might earn money, but only one is building something that can potentially separate income from time. This distinction changes the entire way you think about work. Most people are trained to think about work in terms of hours. You work an hour, you get paid for an hour. You work more hours, you make more money. But there is a natural ceiling to that model because there are only so many hours in a day. Naval's approach is to ask a different question. How can one unit of effort create value many times over? That's where leverage enters the picture. Leverage is one of the central ideas in Naval's philosophy. Think about a traditional worker. If that person wants to double their output, they may need to work twice as much. But imagine a software developer who spends 6 months creating an application. Once the application exists, thousands or even millions of people can potentially use it. The developer doesn't have to personally sit beside every user. Or imagine a creator who spends 10 hours making a video. That video can potentially be watched by thousands or millions of people long after the creator has finished making it. The work has been multiplied. Technology, software, media, capital, and organizations can all act as forms of leverage. The important insight is that modern technology has dramatically increased the amount of leverage available to an individual. A person with a laptop and an internet connection can potentially reach an audience that previous generations of creators could only dream about. One person can publish a book, build a software, launch a digital product, create a media company, teach millions of people, or build an online community. This doesn't mean success is guaranteed. It means the structure of opportunity has changed. And if you understand leverage, you stop asking only, how hard can I work, and start asking, how can I make my work scale? That question is enormously important because effort by itself doesn't determine results. Two people can work equally hard and get completely different outcomes because the systems around their work are different. Naval, therefore, puts enormous emphasis on building rather than simply laboring. If you only sell your time, your income is naturally constrained by your available hours. But if you create something that can be replicated, distributed, or owned, your upside can become much larger. This leads to another major idea: ownership. Imagine working at a company for 10 years and receiving a salary every month. Now imagine building a company and owning part of it. The first model can provide stability and income. The second creates the possibility of equity and long-term wealth. Naval isn't saying everyone needs to quit their job and become an entrepreneur. That's a common misunderstanding. The deeper point is that ownership changes the relationship between your effort and your reward. When you own an asset, the value of that asset can grow even when you're not actively working every minute. That's why entrepreneurs, investors, creators, and business owners often focus on equity. They're not simply trying to earn more today, they're trying to own something that could become more valuable tomorrow. But ownership alone isn't enough. You also need something valuable to own. And that brings us to one of Naval's most interesting concepts: specific knowledge. Specific knowledge is knowledge that is difficult to replace and difficult to teach through a generic course or standardized training program. It often comes from a strange combination of your natural abilities, your interests, your personality, your experiences, and the things you're unusually curious about. Think about someone who has spent years obsessively studying human behavior. Another person might be naturally fascinated by technology. Another person might have an unusual ability to explain complicated ideas in simple language. Another person might have incredible taste in design. Another might understand sales instinctively. These are not necessarily skills you can acquire by simply following a standard checklist. They emerge from the intersection of curiosity and experience. The important part is that specific knowledge often feels natural to the person who has it. You might look at someone and think, how are they so good at that? But to them, the activity may feel obvious. They have spent years following their curiosity without realizing that they were building an advantage. This is why one of the most useful questions you can ask yourself is not, what career is popular right now, but what am I naturally drawn towards that other people find difficult? Your curiosity can be a signal. Your unusual interests can be a signal. The things you repeatedly do without being forced can be a signal. Your goal is to identify those signals and develop them into something valuable. But there is another problem. Having a unique skill doesn't automatically make you wealthy. You need to combine that skill with accountability and leverage. Accountability means putting your reputation behind your work. Think about the difference between someone who simply participates in a project and someone whose name is attached to the result. When your reputation is connected to an outcome, people have a reason to trust you. You become known for something. Over time, reputation can compound. If people know you consistently produce excellent work, opportunities can start coming toward you instead of you constantly chasing them. This is one of the less obvious forms of leverage. Trust. Imagine two people trying to start a business. One has no track record and no reputation. The other has spent 10 years building relationships, producing valuable work, and earning trust. When an opportunity appears, the second person is more likely to receive it. That's why long-term reputation matters. It can create opportunities that aren't available to everyone. And this connects to Naval's idea of playing long-term games with long-term people. Most people think of business as a series of transactions. I give you something, you give me something. But long-term relationships change the economics. If you know you'll be dealing with someone for 10 years, trust becomes valuable. You don't need to squeeze every possible dollar out of every interaction. You can focus on creating mutual value because the relationship itself is an asset. The same principle applies to friendships, partnerships, and professional networks. People remember how you behave. Someone who constantly tries to win short-term battles may eventually find themselves without people who want to work with them. Someone who is reliable, fair, and useful can build a network that becomes increasingly powerful over time. This is another form of compounding. Money compounds. Knowledge compounds. Reputation compounds. Relationships compound. Trust compounds. The difficult part is that compounding is almost invisible at the beginning. If you invest $1 today, you don't immediately see a fortune. If you learn a new skill today, you don't immediately become an expert. If you build a reputation today, nobody suddenly calls you a legend. But after years of consistent effort, the difference becomes enormous. This is why patience is such a powerful advantage. In a world obsessed with instant results, the person willing to play a 10-year game has an advantage over someone who changes direction every 3 months. Think about content creation. One video might fail. 10 videos might fail. Even 50 videos might produce disappointing results. But if the creator keeps improving their storytelling, editing, research, thumbnails, and understanding of the audience, the accumulated knowledge can eventually become a competitive advantage. The same principle applies to business, investing, fitness, and almost everything else. You can't judge a long-term strategy using only short-term results. Of course, patience doesn't mean blindly continuing with something that doesn't work. You still need judgment. You need to measure results, learn, adapt, and improve. Patience means giving a good strategy enough time to compound before abandoning it. This leads us to another major theme: judgment. In Naval's worldview, good judgment is one of the highest value skills you can develop. Why? Because decisions compound too. A good decision can create opportunities that lead to more opportunities. A bad decision can create problems that create even more problems. And as your leverage increases, the consequences of your decisions increase too. If one person makes a mistake privately, perhaps only they are affected. If a leader with thousands of employees makes a bad decision, the consequences can spread across an entire organization. This is why learning how to think is often more valuable than simply collecting information. Reading is useful, but understanding is more important than volume. You don't need to read 100 books just to say you've read them. You want to understand principles that help you make better decisions. Learn about incentives, learn about probability, learn about economics, learn about psychology, learn about history, learn how systems behave, learn how people respond to rewards, learn how markets work, learn how your own biases influence your decisions. Because humans aren't perfectly rational. We often protect our ego instead of protecting the truth. Imagine you strongly believe an investment will succeed. Then you discover evidence suggesting you're wrong. A rational thinker asks, what does the evidence tell me? An emotional thinker asks, how can I prove myself right? That difference can cost enormous amounts of money and time. Good judgment requires the ability to change your mind. Your beliefs should be tools for understanding reality, not identities you must defend. If new evidence appears, update your belief. This sounds simple, but it's difficult because people often connect beliefs to their ego. They don't want to admit they were wrong. But being wrong is not a personal failure. Refusing to update when reality changes is the real failure. This is also why Naval places value in reading deeply and following curiosity. Instead of reading only what's popular, explore the subjects that genuinely interest you. One idea can lead to another. A book about economics can change how you understand business. A book about psychology can change how you understand relationships. A book about history can change how you understand politics and society. A scientific concept can change how you understand decision-making. Knowledge becomes powerful when different areas connect. And now we arrive at the other half of Naval's philosophy, happiness, because there is a trap hidden inside the pursuit of wealth. You can become very good at making money and still become terrible at living. You can optimize your career while destroying your health. You can build a company while losing your relationships. You can gain status while becoming increasingly anxious about maintaining it. You can become financially independent and still be mentally dependent on other people's opinions. Naval's answer is that happiness has to be treated as a skill rather than a reward. Most people think happiness comes after success. They say, I'll be happy when I get the promotion. I'll be happy when I make $1 million. I'll be happy when I buy the house. I'll be happy when I find the right person. But human beings adapt. When you get what you wanted, the excitement eventually fades and the new situation becomes normal. Then the mind creates another target. You buy the car, then you want the better car. You get the promotion, then you want the next promotion. You reach one financial goal, then you create another. Goals can be useful, but the problem begins when you tell yourself that you cannot be happy until the goal is achieved, because then happiness becomes permanently located in the future. You're always waiting. Naval's philosophy challenges this pattern by focusing on desire. Desire itself isn't evil. Ambition isn't evil. Wanting to improve your life is not a problem. The problem is believing that a particular external outcome is necessary for your inner peace. If you believe, I cannot be happy unless I have this, you have given that external thing control over your happiness. Freedom begins when you can want something without believing you need it for your existence to be okay. This is a subtle but powerful distinction. You can pursue success while remaining emotionally independent of the outcome. You can work toward a goal while appreciating your current life. You can want more money without believing you're worthless until you have it. You can want a relationship without believing you're incomplete without one. You can want recognition without needing everyone to approve of your decisions. This is where the idea of envy becomes important. Modern life makes comparison almost unavoidable.
Open social media and you'll see people showing their best moments. Someone bought a house, someone started a company, someone traveled around the world, someone became famous, someone looks incredibly successful, and your brain compares their highlight reel to your behind-the-scenes life. That comparison can create dissatisfaction even when your own life is objectively improving. Naval's philosophy suggests that you need to be careful about playing games that you don't actually care about. If you don't define what winning means for yourself, society will define it for you. You'll chase the salary because everyone else does. You'll chase the title because it sounds impressive. You'll buy things because other people recognize them as symbols of success. But eventually, you may realize that you are winning somebody else's game. This is why defining your own version of success is so important. For one person, success might mean building a billion-dollar company. For another, it might mean having enough money to work 4 days a week. For another, it might mean raising a family and living quietly. For someone else, it might mean creating art. There is no universal scoreboard. The danger is assuming there is. Once you understand this, freedom becomes more than financial independence. It becomes psychological independence. You don't need to prove yourself constantly. You don't need everyone to approve of your decisions. You don't need to win every argument. You don't need to compare your life to everyone else's. You can choose your own game. This doesn't mean becoming indifferent to improvement. It means improving because you value the process, not because you're terrified that you're not enough. Another important part of happiness is presence. Think about how much of your day your mind spends somewhere else. You're eating, but you're thinking about work. You're working, but you're thinking about tomorrow. You're talking to someone, but you're checking your phone. You're on vacation, but you're worried about your next deadline. Your body is in one place while your mind is somewhere else. But the present moment is the only place where life actually happens. You can remember the past, but you can't experience it again. You can plan for the future, but you can't live it yet. The present is where your experience exists. This is one reason meditation and stillness can be useful. You don't necessarily need a complicated spiritual system. The basic practice is simply learning to observe your own mind. Sit quietly. Notice your thoughts. Notice your emotions. Notice the urge to react. You begin to realize that thoughts appear and disappear. An anxious thought can appear without being a command. An angry thought can appear without requiring action. A fearful thought can appear without being a prediction of the future. The more distance you create between yourself and your thoughts, the more choice you have. You don't have to believe everything your mind tells you. You don't have to follow every desire. You don't have to react to every emotion. You can pause, and in that pause, you can choose. This is a form of freedom that money can't buy. Imagine someone with millions of dollars who is constantly controlled by fear, envy, anger, and status anxiety. Now imagine someone with far less money who can sit quietly, enjoy a meal, appreciate their relationships, and sleep peacefully at night. Which person has more internal wealth? This is why Naval treats external wealth and internal happiness as two separate skills. You need to learn both. Building wealth without learning happiness can create a very successful prison. Learning happiness without supporting yourself financially can create a different kind of dependence. The goal is to build both. And this is where the concept of freedom becomes the central theme connecting everything. Why build wealth? Freedom. Why develop skills? Freedom. Why create leverage? Freedom. Why own assets? Freedom. Why learn to control your desires? Freedom. Why develop good judgment? Freedom. The ultimate goal is to have control over your time and your mind. Time is the one asset you can never replenish. If you lose money, you can potentially make it again. If you lose a business, you can potentially build another. But when an hour disappears, it is gone permanently. This changes the way you should think about your life. Instead of asking only, how much money does this job pay? Ask, what is this job doing to my time? Instead of asking only, how impressive is this opportunity? Ask, what kind of life does this opportunity create? Because a job can be financially attractive and still be a terrible trade if it consumes every hour of your life. At the same time, not every low-paying job is bad. Sometimes a lower-paying opportunity gives you skills, relationships, or experience that can create much greater opportunities later. That's why judgment matters. You need to look beyond the immediate paycheck. Ask what you're building. Ask what you're learning. Ask who you're becoming. Ask what assets you're accumulating. Ask whether your current work increases or decreases your future options. This is the concept of building a career like a portfolio of skills, rather than simply collecting job titles. Every experience can become an asset if you extract knowledge from it. A failed business can teach you about customers. A difficult job can teach you about management. A side project can teach you about marketing. A failed investment can teach you about risk. A public mistake can teach you about communication. Nothing is automatically wasted if you learn from it, but you need to pay attention.
One of the biggest advantages you can create for yourself is becoming a person who learns faster than circumstances can defeat you. And that requires curiosity. Curiosity is one of the strongest recurring themes in Naval's thinking. Follow what interests you. If you're fascinated by a subject, explore it deeply. Don't worry too much about whether the interest is immediately profitable. Sometimes, the things you learn because you're curious become the foundation of your future advantage. Your interest can lead you into unexpected combinations. Maybe you love technology and storytelling. That combination could lead to educational media. Maybe you love finance and psychology. That could lead to investment research or financial education. Maybe you love design and software. That could lead to product development. The intersection of different skills can become your specific knowledge. This is another reason copying successful people is dangerous. You don't know their exact combination of circumstances, personalities, skills, interests, and timing. You can learn principles from them, but you can't simply copy their life. You have to discover your own combination, and that requires experimentation. Try things, build things, talk to people, create projects. Learn what gives you energy and what drains it. Pay attention to what you're naturally good at. Pay attention to what people repeatedly ask you for help with. Those clues can reveal your specific advantage. Another major lesson is that you don't necessarily need permission to begin. The internet has lowered the cost of creation dramatically. You can publish an article, start a channel, build a small website, create software, sell a product, teach a skill, build an audience. You can experiment before you have a perfect plan. In many cases, the best strategy is to start small and learn from reality. Ideas are cheap. Execution creates information. You may think people want the particular product, but the market can tell you whether they actually do. You may think a video topic will perform well, but the audience will tell you. You may think a business model works, but customers will tell you. Reality is an incredible feedback system if you're willing to listen. This is why judgment improves through experience. You don't need to avoid every mistake. You need to avoid repeating the same mistake without learning. Now consider another important principle: long-term thinking. Modern culture often rewards urgency. Everything is now. Instant delivery, instant entertainment, instant communication, instant results. But many of the most valuable things in life operate slowly. Trust takes time. Expertise takes time. Health takes time. Wealth takes time. Relationships take time. Reputation takes time. There is no shortcut around compounding. You can accelerate learning, but you cannot completely eliminate time. This is why patience itself becomes a competitive advantage. If you can remain focused while others constantly switch strategies, you can accumulate an advantage. If everyone wants to become rich overnight, the person willing to spend 10 years building something meaningful is playing a different game. The same is true of happiness. If everyone is constantly chasing stimulation, the person who learns to enjoy simplicity becomes less dependent on external excitement. You don't need a more intense life. You may need a more present one. This brings us back to desire. Consider how many things in modern life are designed to create dissatisfaction. Advertising tells you that you're missing something. Social media shows you what other people have. Algorithms constantly offer the next piece of entertainment.
The result can be a mind that is never satisfied. You consume something, then immediately want the next thing. You achieve something, then immediately want the next achievement. You become addicted to the feeling of progress without ever experiencing enoughness. Naval's philosophy suggests that peace comes partly from reducing this dependence. You can still be ambitious, you can still build, you can still improve, but you don't have to hate the present version of yourself in order to improve the future version. That's a crucial distinction. Improvement doesn't have to come from self-hatred. It can come from curiosity. Instead of saying, "I'm not good enough, so I have to become successful," you can say, "I'm curious about what I'm capable of becoming." The second mindset is much healthier because it doesn't make your worth dependent on the result. This also changes how you handle failure. If your identity depends on winning, failure becomes devastating. But if your identity is based on learning and building, failure becomes information. You can lose a deal without believing you're a failure. You can publish a bad video without believing you're a bad creator. You can make a bad investment without believing you're incapable of learning. Your job is to extract the lesson and continue. Over time, these lessons become judgment. And judgment is one of the most valuable assets you can develop because it affects everything else. Good judgment tells you which opportunities to pursue. It tells you which people to trust. It tells you when to quit. It tells you when to be patient. It tells you what deserves your attention. It tells you what not to care about. And perhaps most importantly, it helps you distinguish between things that look valuable and things that actually are valuable. Status can look valuable, but freedom may be more valuable. A huge salary can look valuable, but ownership may be more valuable. Constant entertainment can feel valuable, but peace may be more valuable. Winning an argument can feel valuable, but maintaining a relationship may be more valuable. The mature person learns to distinguish appearance from reality. That's ultimately what this entire philosophy is about. Seeing reality clearly enough to make better choices. You don't need to become Naval Ravikant. You don't need to follow every opinion he has. You don't need to become an entrepreneur. You don't need to wake up at a specific time or follow some perfect productivity routine. The value is in the mental models. Ask yourself, what game am I playing? Do I actually want to play it? What am I uniquely good at? What can I build? What can I own? Where can I use leverage? Which relationships are worth investing in? Which skills will compound? Which desires are controlling me? What does freedom mean to me? And what would my life look like if I stopped trying to impress people who aren't actually living my life? Those questions can change the direction of your life more than another productivity hack ever could, because productivity is useful only after you know what you're trying to accomplish. You can become extremely efficient at climbing a ladder that is leaning against the wrong wall. The deeper goal is not to do more, it's to do what matters. It's to build a life where your time, attention, relationships, and energy are aligned with your values. Wealth can support that life. Skills can support that life. Leverage can support that life. But none of them are the final destination. Freedom is. And freedom has two dimensions. The first is external freedom, control over your time, money, work, and location. The second is internal freedom, control over your reactions, desires, attention, and identity. You can have one without the other, but the combination is powerful. Imagine having enough financial stability that you can say no to work you don't respect, while also having enough emotional stability that you don't need approval from everyone around you. That's a different kind of wealth. You don't wake up every morning asking, "What do other people expect from me?" You ask, "What is worth doing?" And then you do it. That is the deeper lesson behind Naval's ideas. Build wealth so you can control your time. Build skills so you can create value. Build leverage so your effort scales. Build ownership so your work can compound. Build reputation so opportunities come to you. Build relationships with people who think long-term. Build judgment so you make better decisions. Build patience so you can benefit from compounding. And build inner peace so that when you finally have more freedom, you actually know how to use it. Because there's a final trap that many ambitious people never notice. They spend their entire lives trying to become free, but they never learn how to live freely. They build wealth, but they remain mentally trapped by status. They gain time, but fill it with distraction. They achieve success, but immediately move the finish line. They finally get everything they once wanted and discover that they still feel restless. The answer is not to stop building. The answer is to understand why you're building. Money is useful because it can buy back your time. Leverage is useful because it can multiply your effort. Knowledge is useful because it improves your decisions. Relationships are useful because life becomes richer when shared with people you trust. But none of these things should become the master. They should remain tools. Your life is the thing they are supposed to serve. So if there is one question to take away from this entire philosophy, it might be this. What would you do with your life if you didn't need to prove anything to anyone? Would you build the same career? Would you live in the same place? Would you chase the same status? Would you spend the same amount of time online? Would you choose the same friends? Would you define success in the same way? You don't have to have all the answers today. In fact, you probably won't. But asking the question is already a beginning. Because the moment you start questioning the default definition of success, you begin designing your own. And perhaps that's the greatest idea in the Almanack of Naval Ravikant. Getting rich is not ultimately about collecting more things. It's about creating enough value and enough freedom that your time belongs to you. Wealth is useful because it can buy back your time. Leverage is useful because it can multiply your effort. Knowledge is useful because it improves your decisions. Relationships are useful because life becomes richer when shared with people you trust. But none of these things should become the master. They should remain tools. Your life is the thing they are supposed to serve. So if there is one question to take away from this entire philosophy, it might be this. What would you do with your life if you didn't need to prove anything to anyone? Would you build the same career? Would you live in the same place?
Would you chase the same status? Would you spend the same amount of time online? Would you choose the same friends? Would you define success in the same way? You don't have to have all the answers today. In fact, you probably won't. But asking the question is already a beginning. Because the moment you start questioning the default definition of success, you begin designing your own. And perhaps that's the greatest idea in the Almanack of Naval Ravikant. Getting rich is not ultimately about collecting more things. It's about creating enough value and enough freedom that your time belongs to you. Happiness isn't about getting everything you want. It's about becoming less dependent on external circumstances for your peace. Success isn't about winning somebody else's competition. It's about choosing a game worth playing. And life isn't about reaching some imaginary finish line where everything finally becomes perfect. It's about learning how to build, learn, love, create, think, and live while the game is still being played. You don't need to become the richest person in the room. You don't need the biggest house, the most impressive title, or millions of followers. You need enough freedom to make meaningful choices, enough judgment to know which choices matter, enough patience to let good decisions compound, and enough inner peace to enjoy the life those decisions create. So build something valuable. Develop a skill that is uniquely yours. Use leverage. Seek ownership. Play long-term games with good people. Learn constantly. Think independently. Protect your attention. Reduce unnecessary desires. Stop comparing your life to someone else's highlight reel. And remember that time is the one asset you can never earn back. Because at the end of the day, the ultimate form of wealth isn't the number in your bank account. It's the number of hours in your life that genuinely belong to you. And the ultimate form of success isn't becoming someone everyone else admires. It's becoming someone whose life you actually enjoy living. That is the game worth playing.